Last week, Ubisoft almost had a good week, and rarely do you hear such a thing these days, seeing as they always find themselves in some type of trouble with the public. Whether it's their quadruple A games, or their use of NFT endgames, or excessive microtransactions, Ubisoft makes it easy for the average consumer to carry some type of disdain for them. This week was different though. Ubisoft released a new trailer for their upcoming action-adventure game, Star Wars Outlaws. If you're unfamiliar with it, Star Wars Outlaws stars a new character named Kay Voss. She's a smuggler operating in the Star Wars underground who catches herself in the middle of the drama going on during the era of the Empire's reign. Outlaws is a open-world third-person cover shooter that looks like it's gonna sport some type of skill tree for your protagonist, but don't quote me on that because we haven't seen enough of the gameplay. The new story trailer that dropped last week was received well by the general public. So well that everyone's favorite magazine, GameStop, loves to pressure you into subscribing to, Game Informer, recently released a 12-page cover story on the game, spilling all the beans. I was excited to read and share the story with my audience live over at twitch.tv/the Black Hokage, but then I learned upon clicking the link that you need to pay to read the cover story. Now my dumbass is just sitting there staring at the paywall like, I'm broke, nigga, I'm broke! The good news is I don't believe that story on Outlaws was that great, seeing as not much coverage came from it. You have to pay to read the Wall Street Journal online, and it's never an issue finding someone who basically remixed their gaming stories for their platform. The only thing I saw coming out of that 12-page Game Informer story is Star Wars Outlaws won't require players to climb towers like every other Ubisoft game. Then again, I could be wrong. Maybe the reason the only piece of news to leak out of that Game Informer cover story is the lack of towers because nobody paid to read it. And maybe they didn't pay to read it because news broke about how much the consumer is gonna have to pay just to play Star Wars Outlaws. Here's the rundown for those of you uninformed. The basic edition of the game will cost you $7, you know, nothing out of the ordinary there. But then they have a $110 gold edition, which also includes the season pass and 3 days early access, which if I could be honest for a moment, I don't think that's too bad. You get the game, all the DLC, and early access to the game, which is decent value for someone who might be more excited about Outlaws than the average person. Where I do understand people's frustration is Ubisoft's third offering, the Ultimate Edition. This one retails for $130, and all you get is a digital art book and some skins. You're just being greedy at this point. Those weak digital items included in the Ultimate Edition should have been a part of the Gold Edition. Ubisoft is trying to rob everyone once again, which is fascinating to see considering they're coming off the release of that stinker Skull and Bones. Ubisoft has committed a crime against gamers.
Your ass going to jail. You going to jail. Lock his ass up. Lock his ass up.
But here's the plot twist. This isn't the only crime Ubisoft has committed against the gaming community last week, and dare I say, it isn't even the worst. The story I'm about to cover managed to slip under the radar due to the general public's backlash towards Outlaws' pricing structure. What story am I alluding to? This one published by PC Gamer a few days ago. Ubisoft is stripping people's licenses for The Crew weeks after its shutdown, nearly squandering hopes for fan servers and acting as a stark reminder of how volatile digital ownership is. So here's a quick summary for those of you unaware. Ubisoft has a racing game called The Crew. Apparently you can drive from the east to the west coast inside of the game, but I'm not sure who would want to do that inside of a game because I don't even want to do that in real life, but that's beside the point. The Crew was released back in 2014, which makes it a 10-year-old game. Ubisoft doesn't think enough people are playing anymore, so they shut down the online servers to save cash. This makes The Crew unplayable, seeing as it's an always online game. And amplifying the problem is now they're removing the game people paid their hard-earned money for, so they no longer have access to this game inside of their library. Essentially, they're revoking everyone's licenses. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who gives a fuck about The Crew? And to that I say, I understand where you're coming from because I don't like the game either, but also,
my nigga, chill.
Gaming has a preservation problem. To simplify things, gaming has no real official museum. Yes, there are small scale museums and retro game stores, but there isn't a preservation movement for gaming at scale like there is for things like dinosaur bones or historical artifacts. The reason this is an issue is because the lack of preservation leads to many games being lost to time, and unless you're a developer with the original code, the community is fucked if they want to return to one of their fondest memories. If you never understood why retro gaming is so expensive to get into, this is the reason why. This is why I constantly encourage my viewers to hold on to their collection of hard copy games, because one day that platform will be old, which also means one day those games that platform served will also be old, making those games hard to find, which increases their value. Hell, I'll give you some examples. Def Jam Fight for New York is going for over $100 on eBay right now. Halo 2 is going for $200, and this factory sealed version of Pokemon Blue version is going for $1,000 on eBay. Retro gaming can be lucrative if you learn the concept of supply and demand. But what happens if all copies of a game game disappear. The game is completely lost because without a hard copy or access to the original code, you can't even create a ROM to run on your favorite emulator.
Allegedly.
Ubisoft deleting games off of people's libraries is just a friendly reminder that although this digital age we live in is great due to all its conveniences, it also has its own problems. You don't own anything, and they're trying to make sure you don't own anything, hence why everyone and their mama has subscription services these days. And this isn't the first case of this happening either. This is something that's trending upwards. Back in December of 2023, Sony removed hundreds of movies and shows people paid for off of their PlayStation account after the Discovery merger, stating that due to our content licensing arrangements with content providers, you will no longer be able to watch any of your previously purchased Discovery content, and the content will be removed from your video library. See, they did it with your movies, and now they're doing it with your games. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say this is how it starts. They start by testing the waters with smaller products such as The Crew. If the feedback isn't too bad, then they'll move on to bigger games. Just because they're fucking over a smaller community doesn't mean you shouldn't care, because MLK famously once said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Who's to say these companies don't start adopting the Disney Vault business model? If you don't know what that is, that's where Disney creates artificial scarcity by only releasing their classic films like once every 10 to 20 years. At least with Disney, you're getting a hard copy of the film. If they were to go digital with this mess on our games, that'd be a nightmare. One day, God of War 2018 is on Steam, the next is gone, only for Sony to re-release it 20 years later when you're thirsty for it and then upcharge you? The natural solution here is to get back into purchasing hard copies of games if possible. I understand some people don't have the space or you just don't want to, but if you can, you should consider it. I'm personally happy I still own the original copies of Mass Effect Trilogy that I bought on the Xbox 360, because every once in a while I get the itch to return and destroy the entire arachnid species. And yes, I'm guilty of purchasing more digital games these days just like you, but this licensing revoking stuff has got me thinking the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I may have to start building up my collection again and just putting away the access games I do have in storage until I'm ready to do something with them. In the meantime, while I figure that out, I did want to share with you that not all is doom and gloom. There is a positive ending to this video, and it's that people are starting to wake up to the preservation issue facing the gaming community. Xbox's Sarah Bond recently was put in charge of a team who will focus on game preservation and backwards compatibility in the Xbox camp. Who knows? Maybe Sony and Nintendo will be influenced by what Microsoft is doing and hop aboard the game preservation movement. And while we wait to see how this all plays out, feel free to click the card on the screen. That'll take you to a video I recently did debating gaming hot takes submitted by you, the audience. Some of y'all said some crazy stuff, and you can only find out what that is by clicking the card on the screen.